Danny Gilfillan for Boxing News. Delighted to be joined by Dave Coldwell via Zoom. Dave, appreciate you hopping on, but we've got to, of course, start on a very somber note: the tragic passing of Ricky Hatton this past weekend. You described Ricky on Instagram as a man who always made it fun to be in his presence. So, if you don't mind, I just would like you to share some of your moments of good crack and fun that people always talk about with Ricky, and you'll have, I'm sure, plenty of them.
Yeah, he was one of those people that he was just he is I can't describe it any better than just saying he's a fun guy, whether it was me taking fighters up to his gym, up in Hyde, where you've got the serious aspect of sparring, but in between or before and after the sparring sessions, he'd be cracking jokes and it's just his personality, his persona. It was just fun. It was just a funny fella. It's hard to if most of us have met Ricky. Most of us know what he is. Um, but for those that never met him, what you actually saw in his little quips and one-liners and things like that on interviews, and if you see him on TV programs that he appeared on, that is him. He'd come to my gym, same thing, and then several times I've been out in Manchester with my missus and we've run into Ricky in a bar or somewhere, and we've ended up being with him for the rest of the night, and his circle of friends, and you just have a laugh. He's absolutely hilarious. Um, it's hard because I said to my wife and my daughter, we were talking about it. It's hard because he I see that he was somebody that always went out of his way to make you laugh. And like I said, you when you're in the presence of when you were in the presence of Ricky Hatton, yeah, you had fun times. It was fun. Um, but to know that he then goes away on his own and it's not fun times, and he has dark moments and he has dark times, and obviously, it's well documented his problems. He's documented himself in interviews where he did a very candid interview where he spoke about his struggles. And I find that so sad. I find that really, really sad because he makes everybody else happy, everybody else smile. You can't not smile around Ricky. You could never not smile and have a laugh. And even when he did, he was doing the after dinner circuit, and he'd do the talking, the one-on-one appearances, where he just get up and talk. And he's like a stand-up comedian. He genuinely is somebody that you would have seen and said he could actually be a comedian. And I think that's why everybody loved him. But like I said, it's sad knowing that it's almost, I'm not saying that's the show, but that that's the persona of himself, put it out there to make everybody else happy, but nobody or he himself couldn't make himself happy enough. It was awful. I was out in Vegas, as you know, and it was the night of the Crawford fight. Get to bed, wake up. I'm my eyes open. I'm buzzing from last night, and I've looked at my phone and I've got loads of messages. But the first message, whenever I see it goes through that, it comes up on the family group chat. So that's the first message that I'll open, and it was my little boy actually that texted me, because they'd left the previous night, the previous day, and it was my little boy that had texted me saying that Ricky had died, and he's 14, and I thought he got it wrong. Like, what? But then obviously you see other messages on your phone, and then you're still in disbelief. You go onto your social media, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was upset. I was upset. I was in the hotel room on my own, and I was upset about it. And I just you again you know and you are aware of struggles that he's had. We all were. Everybody's aware of the issues that he's had in the past, but it's still a shock. It was a huge shock. And yeah, it's you just think about his kids, his family. I work, I get on with the Hattons, Matthew, Matthew's Mrs. Jenna, and and obviously Campbell's a lovely kid. Um, so your thoughts go straight out to them. And I've got a very good friend of mine. He's one of Ricky's best mates, and I just know that he's in absolute turmoil. And it's such a big he's such a big character, such a much loved character, um that the shockwaves throughout the boxing industry, but then into the fan base, everybody loved him. It's like you don't have 20, 25, 30,000 people or whatever it was go over to Vegas to watch your box when money's tight, and it's a lot of people that aren't wealthy that are going over and spending the money. It's because they loved him. The nights that we had at the MEN watching his career unfold, and then obviously the the Costa Zoo fight, and then you see him go off to America and do what he did, and he fought the two biggest names and best fighters of our, two of the best fighters of our generation in Pacquiao and Mayweather. The country was with him every moment, every step of the way along that way. I know Ricky. I first saw Ricky. I think it was his second pro fight, or maybe third pro fight, when he boxed the guy out of Brendan Ingles' gym, which is where I was at, called Marty Renigan. And that from then on, I followed Ricky's career. So it's yeah, it's sad, and to think he's 46 years old. That's no age. It's no age, and it's just horrific. It really is, and it's just another one where we always say it. We always say after the event. We always say, you know, you need to talk. People need to talk. But it's very very important. You just don't know. You just don't know what you know. People put on a veil that they're happy, that they're smiling, that everything's cool. Um, Everybody around him thought he was in a good spot right then. Um, and then there's demons that they can't escape, and we just need to talk. And as listen, it's everybody, male or female, but the suicide rate for men is horrific. It's something that's a massive killer of men. And I don't know if I don't know if it's a stigma, or if people feels like they shouldn't speak, they shouldn't show emotion. I don't know, but not enough is being done to help men with problems with stress. There's a lot of weight of expectancy. There's a lot of pressure to deliver for men. And I'm not being sexist. Please don't take this as the wrong way. I understand that women go out to work, women provide families and everything like that. I understand that, and my wife works. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect women as well. It can affect both. But what I'm saying is that when the numbers don't lie, and when you look at the numbers of men that are committing suicide, men that are having serious mental health problems, there's something in there, and there is a weight of expectancy on men to thrive, to provide, to be successful. And sometimes, even when you're successful, it's not enough. And when you're an athlete and you're being successful, and then what comes after that, it's still not enough on what you've done before. You've still got the rest of your life to, make yourself happy. And, I just feel that, yeah, there's obviously, numbers don't lie. There's a serious issue with men, and it's not about money. People turn around. I see things where somebody says that they're struggling, or this is another thing where perhaps men don't speak out about, or it's even successful people don't speak out. Where if they complain that they're not happy, or if they say that things aren't great at the moment, people turn around and say, "Well, you're earning this, you're earning that." You see it with footballers. You see it with footballers, because obviously I say football because they're in the majority they're earning like money that we can only dream about, and people just turn around and say, "Well, I'd have your problems if I was getting 350 grand a week." If money was what made everybody happy and money solved everybody's problems, don't get me wrong, it solves a lot of problems, but if it solved everybody's issues, then you wouldn't have high-powered businessmen killing themselves. You wouldn't have high-level sportsmen killing themselves and women, and you wouldn't have people that are successful that are doing things like that. It's not. Money gives you freedom, gives you more freedom, yes, and it gives you the ability to make more choices. But it's not a guarantee of being happy. Being successful is not a guarantee of being happy. That's why I always think that success depends on the individual. What do you view success as? And I always say, I try and say to my kids and to my fighters, chase happiness. Like, do things that make you happy. Don't just chase success, because you can win a world title and then you wake up the next day and there's a bit of euphoria. A couple of days later, it's kind of like died down. It's like you're back to where you were. It's like it's the next thing. Even down to you win a fight. I watched Terence Crawford, and not just Crawford, but everybody. Everybody wins. You win a world title. But Terence Crawford's interview in the ring, he's just become three-time undisputed champion, just beaten Canelo. And literally one of the first things that Max Kellerman's saying is, "Who's next? What are you going to do next?" We're not allowed, not that we're not allowed, but we're kind of like distracted from enjoying the moment and soaking it in, and everything's rushed to what's next, so you can't kind of switch off. And again, I'm not saying this is what causes issues, but you can't help that if you can't have time to enjoy what you're doing, then how do you not? Because enjoyment and fun and happiness is built, and you have to build that up to counteract the bad shit that goes off in life, because everybody has bad shit. Might be personal issues, might be relationship issues, might be health, might be a family ill health. There's things that go off in people's lives that affect us all. Um, and if you don't have that cushion of happiness on this side, then the negative side and the stress and the worry and the upset tips the balance, the scales. Um, so we need to learn as people. We need to learn to kind of like appreciate where you're at, appreciate the little small wins, and don't chase too hard straight after for the next one, for the next big, because you've accomplished a lot in what just being what you're doing. Everybody's got elements of accomplishments in the life. Doesn't matter what you are, doesn't matter what job you do, doesn't matter what you know whereabouts you are in your life. There's certain things you've ticked a box, you've done well. But you don't recognize that because you're chasing the big wins all the time.
If you mentioned earlier Ricky's struggles, it was well documented that he had a tough time coming to terms with retirement. It's a tale as old as time. Fighters, athletes in general, not being able to adapt to civilian life, I guess, after reaching such unimaginable highs. I wonder, is there any more as a boxing community in particular we can do to aid that transition a very small number of fighters can go into promotion, management, punditry work. Ricky done all of those and still struggled to fill that void. Just is there any thoughts on what could be done to, help fighters when they hang up the gloves?
Um, I don't have the answers. I don't. I'll be honest with you. I don't. I'm not going to pretend to have the answers. I I fell into coaching and then fell into management and just ran with it, and that was it. Um, so I was lucky where I get the buzz from the coaching side of things and look after fighters' careers. I get the buzz out of that. So for me, from a personal point of view, I was lucky that I've got the problem is a lot of fighters haven't got the patience to become coaches. We talk about more ex-boxers should be referees. But if they don't want to be referees, they're not going to go into refereeing. They're not, it's got to be something that they want to do. Um, in terms of like just having support and things like that, it's it's very difficult because um, a fighter retires and then they go off into the sunset and they do what they want to do. Hard. I try and stay in touch with people. I'll drop them a message every so often, or whatever, but not I've spoke with other coaches about this, but majority of fighters once they've retired, they don't stay in touch with the coach. They don't stay in touch with people. It's kind of like the I don't know where it's how many school teachers do you stay in touch with that were having a big impact in your life when you was a kid. You kind of don't. You move on to the next stage of your life. Um, so I don't know, but in I just feel as though maybe there could be a part of the an organization that's set up that's there if fighters want to get in touch and to you know um get together and go to shows, go to events, things like that. Maybe if there's a bit, but it takes a lot of infrastructure and people to be sat there and wait and see if people want to be part of it. Also, it needs funding and things like that. We can always look at ways of spending money and setting things up, but do they actually work? Will people take advantage of things like that? I don't know. It's maybe something that we need to speak to fighters that are struggling. People that like Ricky did make us aware that he was struggling a little bit. Maybe, if we can speak to fighters, ex-fighters like that are quite open about it and ask them, what do you think would help? You know, I think we need to, I don't know, I think maybe that's the way to try and unlock this. It's, it, I don't know to be honest.
Well, incredibly sad stuff, and we echo your sentiments and send our condolences to Ricky's friends and family. Dave, as you mentioned there, you were over in Las Vegas to see Terence Crawford become three-time undisputed champion of the world. Certainly a win that is up there with the best that I can remember. What was your take on the fight?
Oh mate, do you know what? I just feel as though it was an absolute privilege for myself to be over there, to watch that live. I called it. I'm not going to lie. I did say in my interviews, and I did say to anyone that I spoke to about the fight, I did feel as though Crawford would do that job on him. But I also said I expect him to ride out a couple of scary moments. Get tagged with a shot, but I thought it'd be too clever to get caught with shots two and three, and he'd be able to gather in his senses and keep the distance. But he never had any rocky moments. He did what he wanted when he wanted. It was a purely dominant display. But I've got to say, in my opinion, I thought this was a better version of Canelo than what we've seen lately. Recently, we just see him with his hands up, walking down, loading up on single shots. He was trying to give different looks. He was trying to box his way. He was trying to be sharper and clever. Um, but he said it best in his interview. He tried, but Crawford had everything, and he was too good. And I've got so much respect for Canelo Alvarez for the way that he handles that defeat because it's a huge defeat. It's a huge defeat. It's a man that's come up a couple of weight divisions, and and completely dominated him, befuddled him, made him look. How many? I said to lads in the gym, how many times have we watched Canelo in these big fights, and how many times you see him like throwing his right foot forward with his right hand, like falling off balance? But he was doing it two, three, four times with Crawford. It's got to the point where he was completely lost. Just nothing worked for him. And then when Crawford started standing inside with him and beating him up on the inside, you just saw that dejected look, and he was like, "What the fuck do I do with this guy?" Um, I thought Crawford were outstanding. It really was. But the way that Canelo took the loss, I've got a lot of respect. I don't like this where people then all of a sudden start jumping on Canelo and saying, "Weren't this, weren't that," and celebrating his downfall. Canelo has been a huge, huge star for our sport for what, a decade. He's been unbelievable, and I like Canelo as he's spoke more and more English. He's brought humour to his press conferences and his interviews. He's great. And there's although I'm a big fan of Crawford as well, and although I tip Crawford to win, at the end of it, when you see Canelo, you got to feel a little bit sad for him. I'm buzzing for Crawford. Unbelievable, and he's another great character. He's come up. He's had difficulties himself. He's not had anything, reward and anything given to him on a plate. He's had to fight his way through. So he deserves everything he gets now, and so he deserves this moment. But you have to feel a little bit sorry for Canelo Alvarez. Just that sadness look on his face. I felt for him. But as for Bud Crawford, wow, what a fighter, mate! What a fighter! Just brilliant. It for me, he had little bits of Pernell Whitaker in there, little bits of Ray Leonard against Duran too, maybe. He was just complete. He was a complete fighter, and everyone talks about the word masterclass. I use the word masterpiece. That was his masterpiece. That performance there, it was unbelievable.
For your eye, Dave, more specifically, where was the fight won and lost in terms of the particulars of what Terence done well and maybe what Canelo didn't do so well?
Brains, boxing ability, IQ, his brains, and his intelligence. He established straight away his lead and lead foot position. He's very good with distance, very good with distance. And I always said the big thing in this fight for me was he wouldn't have a height and reach disadvantage to cope with, as well as the extra weight. But there was I don't know if it was round 5 or something like that. There was a clinch, and in the clinch, Crawford just turned Canelo, so Canelo's back was against the ropes. And I was like, boom, that shows you there. Crawford's strength was so underrated going into that fight. He was strong in the clinches as well. He was strong physically up close. And I think the fact that he was strong physically, I think surprised Canelo. Canelo had one round where I think he started landing some good right hands, a couple of good right hands to the body, but he landed a couple of right hands to the head. Crawford perhaps switched off a little bit, and he just left his head on that line, and he got nailed with a couple of right hands. He also got hit with the right hand on over top, but you know, Crawford showed a great chin. He showed, when sometimes when fighters go up in weight, they're not dehydrating themselves as much, and they're not weakening themselves to make a weight. And it's a weight where there's more fluid in the brain, they're more comfortable, can take a shot better. Um, Crawford handled the power of Canelo. He never looked worried at all. But what I was so impressed with watching live was, forget all his own punches and his distance and his feet and angles. It was how he was watching everything, and it's slowing things down in your mind, but being quick to react. So he would see Canelo throwing a shot wide as he's moving that way, and he'd just bring his hand and he'd just push in the shot. And then once he'd see the left hook coming when he's exiting to his right. He'd just drop his elbow down to catch it there. He was catching everything or just taking the sting out of everything. And then what he'd then be doing is he'd be catching and just without loading, just shooting with the opposite hand, shooting with the opposite hand. And so he would put Canelo in a position where he's thrown, but then he's vulnerable getting caught back. And you could see that frustrating Canelo as the fight went on. But then at the end of the fight, you actually see the state of Canelo's face, the swellings around the jaw, the cheekbone. So they were heavy enough shots, you know. And I was just impressed with his overall boxing. It was fantastic.
I'm sure Terence Crawford hasn't given too much thought to what might be next, but nothing to stop us talking about it. What would you like to see him do, Dave? He could retire on what would be the ultimate high. People
Could
are saying he could potentially go down to middleweight and who knows, become a four-weight undisputed. What would you like to see Bud do next?
yeah, could you imagine if he retires? Do you remember when Roy Jones beat John Ruiz
Yeah,
for
heavyweight.
the heavyweight title? I think if Roy had retired then, he'd have gone down as the greatest. I think that by carrying on, by went down in weight, back down to light heavyweight, his body never recovered, and then he just carried on, carried on, carried on, and it tars his standing, and especially with the your younger fans and people like that didn't actually see Roy when he was at his best. They
Right.
forget, they don't talk about Roy Jones. They don't understand how good Roy Jones was. They just look at this guy that's lost all these and doing these exhibitions and things this like that. Um, if if Crawford was to retire now, what a resume that is. He could whether you believe he's the greatest or not, he is in that argument where people around a table in a pub sat amongst themselves on WhatsApp groups, you're arguing about who the greatest fighter is that there's ever been. His name would be in that mix if he was to retire now. Three-time undisputed champion, three-weight undisputed champion. This little guy that's come up, gone all the way through, and then beaten Canelo Alvarez, jumping up a couple of divisions. You know, I think that would be unbelievable. If he does choose to carry on, then I think your shout's the best. Middleweight, drop down to middleweight. And could he do it there? But you can't remember he's 38. This is why, when people are talking about age and oh yeah, Canelo's older. Well, Canelo's not as old as Crawford. Can't use that excuse for what Crawford did. The worry that you have when you get to that age is time can catch up on you. And it can catch up on you like that. You can look great today, and in a few months' time, all of a sudden it catches up on you. But yeah, middleweight's a good shout. If he was to go down and take on Janabek, mate. And imagine he goes and beats Janabek. But I'd like him to retire. But failing that'd probably be the one that'd get his juices flowing and because he's Janabek's probably the best in that division. Would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think he'd be the one that I think if he was to dangle that carrot to become a world champion in the middleweight division, maybe that's the one that keeps him going.
I think the selfish boxing fan and us would all love to see him have a stab in it, but at the same time, you definitely couldn't begrudge him a retirement.
I'd like him to retire. I'd like him to retire and go out as a GOAT and is in that conversation where people can argue about his name there.
Just a word on Canelo Alvarez. Dave came up short against a fighter who's, I think, at the very least on the Mount Rushmore of boxers. What would you like to see him do next? As a bit younger than Crawford, as you say, but a lot more rounds and a lot more fights under his wing. Of course, been fighting professionally since 15. What next for Canelo, do you think?
Um, Listen, I'm a fan of Canelo. I am. It's difficult to say because he doesn't become like a shit fighter overnight. He got beaten by a great fight. It's like when Usyk beat Fury. Everybody's he's shit. Oh, he's this, he's that. It was no. He got beat by the best, and it's same with Canelo. He's been beaten by the best, No shame in that. And what I like about Canelo, he takes on these challenges. Look, he stepped up, didn't work out, but he stepped up to fight Bivol. You know, we all knew that Bivol's a great fighter. He stepped up to take him on. I would, I would like to see him win another world title if he's, if he's going to carry on. I believe he's got 2 more fights with Riyadh season.
Yeah.
So I would like to see him win another world title and come back and prove people wrong again. But I don't know. I don't know who's there. I don't know what, because it's got to be a sellable fight. It's got to be a really good fight for him, maybe I don't know if he would. He probably wouldn't be able to do. No, he won't be able to do middleweight. So it'd be a case of, if Crawford gives up the belts,
Yeah.
he gets a vacant title shot. There you go. You would always say at this stage, Benavidez, that's the fight that you still kind of wanna see. It's Benavidez. I know Hamza Shiraz is coming up. Might be a little bit early for Shiraz, but they might look at that and think that, they can do a job on him. That'd be a blockbuster fight for Shiraz. I don't know if it does anything for Canelo coming off of Crawford to fight a prospect. Whereas Benavidez, I know he's kind of been swerving him throughout. Does he take him on coming off for a loss? I doubt it. But also the flip side to that is, would he want to retire knowing that a lot of the fan base would always say that he ducked Benavidez? I don't think he would.
Yeah. Well, interesting. I can't imagine he'll want to go out in a loss either. So if I had to guess, I'd say we will see him back in the ring. Just very last thing, I want to get your thoughts on, Dave, because I've taken up plenty of your Friday evening so far. The rematch press conference, Chris Eubank Jr. for Conor Benn 2, very much picked up where they left off, particularly Chris and Eddie Hearn. What did you make of it?
Great TV. Great TV. I'll be honest with you, Eubank won me over in the build-up for the first fight. I kind of switched off on him yesterday because he was just talking shit again, moaning about weight, hydration clauses, the bullshit about the ambulance. That can't happen. That's not. There's no way that, I don't care if it's Edian, if it's Frank Warren, if it's Dana White or whoever it is. No promoter is stopping an ambulance from leaving a venue. And that's dangerous shit what he's saying there, because that's well out of order. Can there be delays? Yes, but that's not a promoter stopping an ambulance from moving away. Have you tried to get out of a venue? When it's a football stadium venue or an O2 arena, MEN arena, it can be quite hectic. But also, if that was the case, why is he waiting until a press conference to speak about, when earlier on they didn't even know if the fight was going to happen? Why didn't he mention that straight away? Like week 1, week 2 after the fight. If that sort of shit had happened, that had been brought up. But when he's banging on about the hydration clause, and I'm hearing his team talking about that, mate, you signed it. You've got, because I said to his I got with his manager Napa, and I said to him, like, before the rematch was agreed and everything, when he says we were talking about, I was like, you can't do it that weight again. I'm talking about 160. I'm not talking about the rehydration clause. I'm at 160, because forget the rehydration clause. You posted that video of yourself killing yourself to make 160. Forget the hydration clause. It's not about that at that point. You showed how bad you struggled. You was wanting the world to see how much torture it was for you to make 160. You went ahead with it. You did it, right? So if it was that bad and you felt that dehydrated in the fight, and then after the fight you're that dehydrated you're on a drip and a mask, oxygen mask, and you're getting rushed to hospital, then you can't then you're 6 months older or whatever it is, and you're gonna go back and do that again. It's not the high. If you're showing a video showing yourself absolutely dying to make that weight there, that's the issue. Is the 160. The hydration clause weren't an issue because his manager, his own people, I think his coach, was it Jonathan Banks or something like that? His coach said, if you remember, there's a video of him where he said that he says after the fight that the hydration clause wasn't an issue because I think he put on 8 pounds or something like that, 7, 8, 9 pounds or something like that. There's a video of Jonathan Banks saying it, and I was like, oh, so the hydration clause wasn't an issue then because it was a £10, I think it was. Was it £10 the hydration clause?
Yeah,
So
9.
it was within the £10 anyway when he did the next day weighing. So I was like, well, that wasn't an issue. The issue is the 160. And so if you're gonna struggle like that and then go back down to 160 again to take the fight, that's on you. That's your choice. Now, if you're saying that the rehydration clause was the issue for the first fight, and you was in that state, then all right, you did it. You got your money. You got the fight. You saw how hard it was the fight. Don't sign for the rehydration clause for the next fight because this fight now is that big where you can dig your heels in and say it's either the no rehydration clause, or I don't take the fight. You're now that big and you're in that strong a position where you can say that. And you've earned the big money. You don't need a few quid. So you can turn around and say, well, fuck your money. I'll not take the fight then. They would then come back and say, eventually, they'll go, all right, let's just get the fight done, forget a rehydration clause. But no, you took the money. You've actually said that you took what was it? They said they took an extra mil so they could do the rehydration clause. So you chose money over your health. So you can't then try and sit there for an hour or whatever it is, trying to get people to feel sorry for you that you've been hard done to because you signed the contract. I was on board with the first one when it was all that, but you don't need to do the second one if that's the case. So I found it boring. Not the things exciting and all of the drama and the back and forth, but I found what his subjects are boring again. He's just going over old shit, really.
Well, looks like the soap opera is set to continue for another couple of months. Dave, thank you so much for speaking to us. I'll let you get on. Have a very good weekend and speak to you again soon, mate.
Cheers, mate. Nice one.